Pia caritatevole amorissima. This is one of the titles of one of Nietzsche's idols from Messina. I am currently in Messina. I'm on the Campo Santo, the main cemetery of Messina, which is where Nietzsche saw a grave with that very engraving on it for a young woman, a girl who maybe killed herself and was still buried here on this Catholic cemetery. It's one of Nietzsche's profoundest meditations on death. He laments the loss of this young woman, a woman he never knew, and he also laments that she couldn't find love, and that if she had found it, she would not perhaps have lost her life. Nietzsche spent a month in Messina in 1882 in March, and very briefly only, I'm here because there was a conference, Nietzsche Oggi, Nietzsche Today, organized by Sandro Gorgone and Giuliana Gregorio, and at the University of Messina here. Nietzsche is, as is sometimes said, is a philosopher who's full of tension or full of contradiction. And that's to say the obvious. His thinking must be one of greatest tension and contradiction, counterpositionality, if you like, precisely because he is at the very edge of what can be said and thought within, let's say, metaphysics, but he's already reaching beyond and outside. And he also sees, though, the inevitable future that's in store for us. In a very notorious note, the fragment of Lenzer Heide, Nietzsche says that our history, our Geschichte, so more our fate or our destiny, is nihilism for the next 200 years. The complete breakdown of the categories of sense, complete breakdown of direction, and at the same time already something other shows itself, namely, as he calls it, in another framework. And there's a longer video lecture on my channel here on the uncanny wheelwork, the enormous wheelwork, perhaps also das unheimliche Räderwerk, the Räderwerk, the wheelwork in which the human being does not find a home but still has to linger on in it somewhat as an ever more finely adapted wheel, as he says. But it's important is that Nietzsche explicitly articulates that the total or complete absolute economic management of the earth is inevitably coming. And so what we're looking for here is the little adjective inevitable. Inevitable, once that says it's coming, as in the Greek tragedy, the Deinon, that which is terrifying, that which is horrifying, is coming, and is coming without any possibility of escape. So Nietzsche is a tragic philosopher, but not in a romanticized kitsch version of it, some grand, wonderful sense of tragedy, but tragedy really in the sense of seeing the utterly inevitable, the inescapable, namely the wheelwork, total economic management and control of the earth. He already speaks of this also in Morgenröte, in Dawn. Nietzsche addresses, it seems even, he doesn't think that this is to be bemoaned, really, to be quite frank with you. Nietzsche goes as far as saying that we have to, this is in Beyond Good and Evil, we have to end the folly that is history. And we have to, at the same time, set the conditions, which is now possible, to end history and to erect this, and he doesn't say it here, but to erect this uncanny wheelwork. He says in Dawn something to the effect of that the earth is supposed to be completely and totally economically managed, and that this is now possible. So in some sense, Nietzsche, the tragic philosopher, is also my friend and colleague Francesco Cattaneo from the University of Bologna calls Nietzsche. Nietzsche is neither an optimist nor a pessimist. He's a truly tragic philosopher in the sense of seeing firmly the tragedy of our epoch and the tragic the inevitable arrival of the reduction of the wheelwork which reduces man. So, but Nietzsche really doesn't bemoan that all too much. It could also, and this is something that's only just now really dawning on me after reading this fragment on the wheelwork for about this essay for, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years now. It's just now dawning on me that Nietzsche's poetic musings in Zarathustra, for example, they just seem to be an attempt to cover over or in some sense, and again, still romanticize, poetize the inevitable truth that the Übermensch is a product, is himself to be produced by the uncanny wheelwork, is hence not birthed. Of course, we would have to consider also what he says about carrying chaos or bearing chaos within oneself, and more on the tragic element as well, that there is an irresolvable darkness at the heart of existence, which is, after all, death. So maybe not to conclude, but to ponder a bit more on death. It seems that it is still death and a terrifyingly beautiful graveyard such as this one that defies the operations of the uncanny wheelwork, the utilitarianism that drives it. There's nothing more useless to the will, to the operations of the wheelwork than the splendor and at the same time the melancholic horror and beauty of a graveyard, these weird last places also of a different air, and where nothing really can be capitalized, or at least not, let's say, financialized. So these places, at least for now, defy completely the non-logic of the wheelwork. The non-logic, I say, because we shouldn't speak the name of Logos in vain. So with this, perhaps, even though Nietzsche sees the inevitability of the coming total economic management of the earth, and at the same time sees that as the tragic dimension of our time, he still, I think there is still something other than, it's not a pure romanticizing that he engages in, or poetizing in Zarathustra. there is, and for that we need to look to those darker passages in Nietzsche, such as the poem I just referred to from Messina, where even though while he wants, because he is in touch with the will to power, he wants the full control of the earth and the setting of conditions so that there is no more history, that there is no more contingency. Yeah? At the same time, there's something else speaking in him and through him also. Another more cosmic, more genuine law that still is in touch with the tragic element that is inevitable also, and that is beyond the inevitability, beyond, not in the sense of another world beyond, but that is outside the clutches and what the wheelwork can want and can want to make, can will to make operational. Now, I don't know how good the microphone is or how bad, depending. Maybe you can hear behind me many cars that are just outside Il Camposanto, and the horns and honks that you can hear there. Perhaps the crazy life of a typical Italian southern city continues, while here the erection of these palazzi del morte, these palaces of death, stand firmly and majestically, not against time, but with time, in a more genuine sense, perhaps precisely because they are in touch with death. A little addendum that just came to me after I finished the first part recording this video. As some of you may be aware, I speak freely, there are no notes. And what came to me afterwards is that the leitmotif, let's say, of Nietzsche's Zarathustra is incipit tragedia, that tragedy may begin, or that tragedy now begins. But again, what tragedy? The tragedy of the inevitability of the total economic management and control of the earth, of the necessity, and Nietzsche affirms this, of setting the conditions so that history can end, this folly that is history, and so that the earth can be completely controlled and managed in all of its inhabitants, plants, animals, and human cattle. And in the fragment on, or in the essay on the wheelwork, the uncanny, unhomely wheelwork in which the human being doesn't really find a home but still is cuddled and safe. It's a safe space for the herd animal. This wheelwork produces the Übermensch. So it produces the Übermensch in the sense of the Übermensch is a product. But now, here's what I wanted to add. To understand how terrifying Nietzsche on nihilism is, anyone who cannot attest to this, see this, shouldn't consider Nietzsche at all. The Übermensch as a product, as a luxury excrement, let's say, as he says, Luxusausschuss, so not surplus, but really as an unnecessary but still necessary outcome of the wheelwork. The Übermensch is supposed to justify the senselessness of the operations of the unhomely wheelwork. Again, this is the peak of Nietzsche's nihilism. Nihilism is not overcome, but instead, through these ecstatic overproductions of that become the Übermensch, what is the Übermensch can justify the senselessness and that of the wheelwork. So the senselessness of the wheelwork through a willful act of the Übermensch becomes sense. But of course, only ever, let's say, for one season or so. So utter senselessness is determined as the new sense, as the sense of the wheelwork. And what's terrifying about the wheelwork is that it is a lot more stable. This is why it's not surplus value, that it's exploitation, etc., as it would be in Marxist economic theory. No, it's a cybernetic circuit that allows for ecstatic exuberance, for an explosion, as it were, of something unnecessary, seemingly unnecessary, but then becoming necessary. That is the Übermensch. Unnecessary in the sense that he becomes the one who can justify the senselessness of the operations of the wheelwork. And this allowing for the fact that what's afforded, what's allowed for, is exuberance, makes this horrendous cycle much more stable than any sort of capitalist, Marxist critique of capitalism, or what the Marxists see as the weak spot of capitalism. In fact, what Nietzsche sees is that this system is so extremely stable precisely because it allows for excess and exuberance and senselessness, that it can always rebound and find a new balance, which is then again justified in its senselessness. Senselessness meaning that nothing really discloses itself. We don't see the essence of things. This is then again nominalistically, through mere positings, Setzungen of the strong will of the Übermensch, again justified in its senselessness. This is the high peak of Nietzschean nihilism. Thank you very much.